At my husband's cousin's wedding, his family introduced me as just the nanny. I had to show them their place. The first time I met Ryan Caldwell, he was trying to fix my laptop at the University Tech Center. His hands moved with a confidence I envied, dismantling the device with practiced ease while I stood by, fretting about my lost thesis draft. "Don't worry," he said, looking up with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I'll get your files back." That was 12 years ago. I was 19, majoring in business with dreams of corporate ladders and corner offices. He was 21, dropping out to help his dad and uncle with their struggling auto parts business. What started as gratitude for recovered files turned into coffee dates, then dinner, then love. Happened so fast, I barely registered that I was falling for the tech guy with grease-stained fingernails and big dreams. "Mia, come see this," Ryan said 6 months later, taking my hand as he led me to a dilapidated garage behind his family's modest home. 3 men, his father James, Uncle Robert, and cousin Tim, were hunched over an engine part, arguing about suppliers and margins. The place smelled of motor oil and desperation. "This is Caldwell Auto Parts. One day, it'll be something great." I nodded and smiled, though I couldn't see what he saw. The business was drowning in debt, with outdated inventory systems and zero online presence. Their books were a mess of handwritten receipts and tax delinquency notices. But Ryan's eyes shone with such certainty that I found myself believing too. 2 years later, we were married. No grand ceremony, just us at the courthouse, followed by a small reception in that same garage. Ryan's mother Claire brought homemade lasagna. His sister Elise took photos on my digital camera. The business had barely improved, but we were young and in love. That was enough. "I think I can help," I told Ryan one night as he stressed over another month of razor-thin margins. "Let me look at your books." He laughed it off at first, but desperation eventually won. I spent weekends organizing their finances, implementing basic accounting software, and identifying waste. My business courses weren't theoretical anymore. They were survival tools. By month 3, I'd found enough savings to hire a part-time employee. By month 6, I'd negotiated better terms with their suppliers. "You're a lifesaver, Mia," James, my father-in-law, said as he reviewed the first profitable quarter in years. "But let's keep this between family. I don't want people thinking we needed help from outside." I nodded, though something in his phrasing stung. Outside. As if marriage hadn't made me family. When I discovered I was pregnant at 23, everyone assumed I'd step back from the business. Instead, I worked harder, determined to secure our future before our child arrived. While nursing morning sickness, I built them an e-commerce website, photographing parts in our living room with careful lighting to make them look professional. "Caldwell Auto Parts is going digital," I announced proudly, presenting the finished site to the family. They scrolled through it with impressed murmurs, but Robert frowned at the logo. "The design is feminine," he said. "Our customers are mostly men." I bit my tongue and changed it, the first of many compromises. When Noah was born, our beautiful, demanding son, I worked with him strapped to my chest. During his naps, I researched digital marketing strategies and taught myself SEO. While he played in his bouncer, I cold-called potential investors, explaining how Caldwell Auto could expand beyond repairs into custom performance parts. "That's my domain," Tim objected when he overheard my pitch. "I've been working on designs for years." "Then let's collaborate," I suggested. "Your designs, my connections." He reluctantly agreed, but at the next family dinner, I heard him telling Ryan, "Your wife's getting a bit too involved. Does she think she's running things now?" Ryan laughed uncomfortably. "She's just trying to help." Just trying to help. As if it were a hobby, not 18-hour days juggling a baby and a business resurrection. When Noah turned 1, I secured our first major investor, a former classmate whose family had venture capital connections. The investment allowed us to move from the garage to a proper warehouse. On moving day, a local business reporter came to cover the story. "So, who had the idea to pivot to e-commerce?" the reporter asked. "It was a family decision," Ryan said, his arm around my shoulder. "The Caldwell men have always been innovators." I smiled for the camera, while something cold settled in my chest. By year 5, Caldwell Auto Parts had become Caldwell Performance, a national brand with 3 warehouses and a manufacturing facility. I'd created their trademark designs, negotiated their first major distribution deals, and personally managed their social media growth to over 500,000 followers. Yet somehow, in company literature, I was relegated to Ryan's supportive wife. When we hit our first million in annual revenue, they threw a party at Robert's new suburban mansion. I arrived late, having just put Noah to bed with a sitter. "There she is," James announced as I walked in. The woman behind the man. Champagne flowed. Toasts were made to Ryan's vision, Tim's designs, Robert's leadership, James's foundation. My name wasn't mentioned once. Later, as we drove home, I finally asked Ryan, "Do they know I built the website that brings in 60% of our revenue? That I negotiated the Henderson deal that saved us last quarter? That I'm the one reading contracts at midnight?" Ryan reached over and squeezed my hand. "Of course they do, babe. But you know how the old guard is. They're from a different time. Does it really matter who gets credit as long as we're succeeding together? We're family." Family. The word that was supposed to make everything better. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was building something for Noah's future, for our shared dreams. That ego had no place in love or business. But as I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, watching our reflection, Ryan smiling, me silent, I wondered how long I could keep believing that lie. What I didn't know then was that the foundation I'd laid so carefully was about to crack, and the people I'd helped lift would be the ones pushing me down. They thought I just married in, but I was there before the logos, the warehouses, the money. And one day, they'd remember that fact. It started small. A credit here, a compliment there, but never to me. By our 7th year of marriage, Caldwell Performance had expanded to 5 states. Our headquarters, a gleaming 3-story building with floor-to-ceiling windows, stood as a testament to hard work and vision. My vision, though no one seemed to remember that anymore. "The quarterly numbers look excellent," I said during a Monday morning meeting, sliding reports across the conference table. "Our online sales are up 37% from last year." Robert nodded without looking at me, then turned to Ryan. "Your digital strategy is really paying off, nephew." I waited for Ryan to correct him, to mention that I was the one who had spent weekends developing that strategy, researching competitors, and optimizing our website while also caring for Noah, now 5 and starting kindergarten. Instead, Ryan smiled and accepted the praise with a modest shrug. "Team effort," he said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Later that day, I cornered him in his office. "You could have mentioned my work on the digital strategy. Does it really matter?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair, now styled by an expensive barber instead of cut by me in our bathroom. "The company's doing well. We're doing well. Why keep score?" "It's not about keeping score," I said, feeling my face flush with frustration. "It's about acknowledgement, respect." He looked at me with something like pity. "They're old school, Mia. You know that. The business is still expanding. We just bought that vacation house. Noah's college fund is growing. Isn't that what matters?" I wanted to argue, but was interrupted by his buzzing phone. Another urgent call from Tim about a potential partnership. I left, the conversation unfinished, like so many others. As the company grew, so did my invisibility. When business magazines wrote profiles on Caldwell Performance's meteoric rise, they interviewed Ryan, Tim, even James, who had been semi-retired for 2 years. No one thought to include me, the person who had secured their first major loan, designed their brand identity, and established their distribution network. One evening, I found a framed article in Ryan's office, featuring him on the cover of Entrepreneur Monthly. The headline read, "The Self-Made Success of Ryan Caldwell." Self-made. I traced the word with my finger, remembering nights I'd worked until 3 a.m. drafting business plans while Ryan slept. The times I'd negotiated with banks when his credit score wasn't good enough. How I taught myself coding to build their first website because we couldn't afford a developer. "Mom, can you help me with my homework?" Noah called from the living room, snapping me back to reality. At home, at least, my contributions were visible, necessary. I helped Noah with his math, made dinner, and tried to push away thoughts of the article, of being erased from my own story. The next milestone in our company's erasure of me came 6 months later. Caldwell Performance had grown large enough to hire an executive team, professionals with MBAs and corporate experience to help manage our expanding empire. "We need someone to take over the books," Ryan told me casually over breakfast. "Someone with formal accounting credentials." I stared at him, my coffee cooling in my hands. "I've been handling our finances for 8 years. I built our accounting systems from scratch." "And you did great," he said, not looking up from his phone. "But we're playing in the big leagues now. The board wants someone with the right letters after their name." The board, comprised of Ryan, Tim, Robert, and 2 investors I'd personally brought on years ago. I was not invited to join, despite having founded the company's most profitable divisions. They hired Maxwell Jenkins, a CPA with slicked back hair and a Harvard degree. On his first day, Ryan introduced him to everyone, ending with me. "And this is Mia, my wife," he said simply. "Not co-founder. Not former CFO. Just wife." Maxwell smiled politely. "Nice to meet you. Ryan tells me you used to help with the books." Used to help. As if I'd occasionally balanced the checkbook rather than architected the entire financial structure of a now multi-million-dollar company. That night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, wondering when I'd become invisible. I was only 31, but felt ancient, hollowed out. My business degree, once a source of pride, now seemed irrelevant in the company I'd helped build. The final blow came during a corporate retreat in Aspen. Noah had come down with a fever, so I stayed with him in our cabin while the rest of the executive team went skiing. When we finally joined everyone for dinner, Noah was feeling better but clingy, sitting on my lap as I tried to eat. Such a devoted mom. Claire, my mother-in-law, commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I always thought hiring a nanny would be better for everyone, but Mia insists on doing it all herself." I forced a smile. "I enjoy spending time with my son." "Of course, dear. But then you miss important business discussions. Ryan needs a wife who can support his career properly." I felt my cheeks burn. Noah sensed my tension and squirmed in my lap, accidentally knocking over a water glass. As I mopped up the spill, I overheard Tim talking to one of our new sales directors. "Who's that with the kid?" the director asked, nodding toward me. "That's Ryan's wife," Tim replied, lowering his voice, but not enough. "She used to do some office work before we expanded. Now she's mostly focused on being a mom. Nice enough, but doesn't really understand the business at this level." I froze, the wet napkin dripping onto my shoes. Ryan sat 2 seats away. He definitely heard, but he continued his conversation with Maxwell as if nothing had happened. That night, as Ryan snored beside me, I opened my laptop and updated my resume for the first time in 8 years. I stared at the screen, at all the accomplishments I couldn't list because they'd been attributed to others, at the career that had been erased one small cut at a time. It was the first step of many I would take in secret, the beginning of my quiet rebellion against being reduced to just anything. What they didn't realize was that they were teaching me something valuable. If my contributions could be so easily forgotten, perhaps their vulnerabilities could be just as easily remembered. Amanda Caldwell's wedding was the social event of the season. Ryan's cousin was marrying the heir of a hotel chain at a historic chateau overlooking vineyards. The guest list included minor celebrities and major business connections, all people Ryan was eager to impress. "Do we really need to go?" I asked, sorting through my closet. "Of course we do," Ryan replied, already in his tailored suit. "The Prestons are coming. They could be huge distributors for us. Always business." I sighed and selected a simple navy dress, elegant but practical enough to chase after Noah, now 6. "That's what you're wearing?" Ryan frowned. "Don't you have something more impressive?" "Impressive wasn't on the dress code," I replied. "Besides, I'll be running after Noah most of the time." About that, I hired Melanie to take Noah after the ceremony. "This is an important networking opportunity, Mia. I need you focused." "On what?" "Standing silently beside you while you take credit for my ideas again." The words escaped before I could stop them. "We're not doing this today," Ryan snapped. Just try to make me look good, okay? For once. For once. As if I hadn't spent years making him look brilliant. The ceremony was picture perfect. Designer silk, released doves, string quartet. Afterward, while guests mingled with champagne, I took Noah to the restroom. When we returned, Ryan was talking with businessmen in expensive suits. One gray-haired man noticed us first. And who might this be? He asked, gesturing toward us. Before Ryan could answer, Claire appeared, champagne flushing her cheeks. Oh, that's just the nanny, she said with a dismissive wave, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. Just the nanny. The words hung in the air like poison. I waited for Ryan to correct her, to say, "No, this is my wife, Mia, the woman who helped build our company from nothing." Instead, he smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. "Jim, tell me more about those distribution centers in Arizona." Noah looked up at me, confused. "Mommy, why did Grandma call you a nanny?" "It's just a misunderstanding, sweetheart," I whispered through a tight throat. We stood there for another excruciating minute before I led Noah away to where balloon animals were being made. I sat watching him, while inside me, something hardened into resolve. Later, after Melanie had taken Noah, I found myself alone during the reception. Ryan was working the room while I sat forgotten with barely touched food and an empty champagne glass. "Mind if I join you?" A woman in a sleek red dress slid into the chair beside me. Veronica Preston, wife of the distribution mogul Ryan, had been courting all evening. She sipped her wine. "So, you're Ryan Caldwell's wife?" "Yes." "Mia Caldwell. Funny, he didn't mention you when discussing the company history, though I got an earful about every male relative who ever touched a car part." I laughed despite myself. "That sounds about right. My husband's the same," she continued. "Takes credit for my work constantly. I built our international division from scratch, but he introduces me as the wife who keeps me organized." "How do you stand it?" I asked. Veronica's smile turned sharp. "Who says I do? I've been documenting everything for years. Every idea he stole, every contract I negotiated, every client I brought in." She leaned closer. "My name might not be on the letterhead, but it's on enough legal documents to matter." Her words cut through years of hurt. I'd been so focused on the emotional betrayal that I'd overlooked the legal reality. "I should find my husband," Veronica said, standing. She placed a business card on the table. "Call me sometime. Women in our position should stick together." I slipped the card into my purse as Ryan returned, loosening his tie. "I think we've got the Preston account," he said proudly. Jim was really impressed with our operation. "Our operation?" I repeated. "How much did you tell him about my role in it?" Ryan's smile faltered. "Mia, not this again. Not here. Your mother called me the nanny. In front of everyone. And you said nothing." He sighed. "She was just joking. You're being too sensitive." "Would you be sensitive if someone erased 8 years of your life's work? Can we just get through this wedding? We'll talk about your feelings tomorrow." My feelings. As if the systemic erasure of my contributions was a mood swing. In that moment, watching him straighten his tie while dismissing my existence, something inside me broke. Not in the way things break when they're destroyed, but in the way they break when they're finally freed. "You're right," I said, smiling for the first time that day. "Let's get through this wedding." What Ryan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that tomorrow would be different. Because tonight, watching Amanda and her groom dance under crystal chandeliers to applause I helped pay for, I had finally decided. I was done being invisible. They thought I was weak. That was their first mistake. The morning after Amanda's wedding, I woke before Ryan. I watched him sleep, peaceful, untroubled, secure in his world where everything revolved around him. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd once been. For the young couple who had dreamed together in a cramped apartment, planning a future where we both mattered. But that couple no longer existed. Perhaps they never had. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office, the smallest room in our house, tucked away like an afterthought. Opening my laptop, I created a new email account under a name Ryan would never think to check. Then I made my first call of the day to Veronica Preston. "I've been waiting for your call," she said. "Have coffee with me tomorrow. There's someone you should meet." That someone turned out to be Diana Chen, a razor-sharp attorney who specialized in business divorces. She listened to my story without interruption, only her occasional nod indicating she'd heard similar tales before. "The good news," she said when I finished, "is that you've been smart enough to keep your name on things. The bad news is that you'll need proof of your contributions. They'll try to paint you as an occasional helper, not a founding partner." "What kind of proof?" I asked. "Everything," Diana replied. "Emails, contracts, early design work, financial records. If you wrote it, signed it, or created it, I want copies. Especially anything with your signature or copyright." For the next 3 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions, making breakfast for Noah, attending his school events, smiling at Ryan when necessary. But behind that facade, I was methodically documenting a decade of theft. I stayed late at the office, catching up on paperwork, copying files to an encrypted drive. I recovered emails from the earliest days of the company, showing how I'd secured our first warehouse lease, while Ryan was still figuring out spreadsheets. I photographed the original sketches for our logo, my handwriting in the margins with notes about color psychology and brand identity. Most importantly, I reached out to our original investors, the ones who had trusted me before Caldwell Performance became a household name. "I always wondered how long you'd put up with it," said Martin Green, our first serious backer, as we met for coffee away from the usual business haunts. "They treated you like a secretary at the Peterson meeting last year." I almost said something. "Why didn't you?" I asked. He looked embarrassed. "Didn't want to rock the boat. But I've kept all our early correspondence. The business plan you wrote. The projections that convinced me to invest. It was your vision I bought into, not just Ryan's hands-on skills." Each conversation, each recovered file, built my case. I worked with cold precision, letting the anger fuel me rather than consume me. During family dinners, while Tim boasted about his latest design award and Ryan shared expansion plans, I smiled and nodded, already seeing the blueprint of their downfall. The most stunning discovery came when I requested copies of our trademark registrations from the patent office. In the early days, when cash was tight, I'd handled all the legal filings myself, staying up late reading about intellectual property law after Noah was asleep. "Mrs. Caldwell," the clerk said over the phone, "all 5 of your original trademarks, including the company name and logo, are registered solely in your name." I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you sure? Not under Caldwell Performance, LLC."
"No, ma'am."
"Just Mia Caldwell." Same with the website domain registration and the initial business license. That night, I finally called my sister Jessica, the only person outside this plan who might notice something was wrong. We hadn't spoken much since I'd married Ryan. His family had always been so all-consuming that my own had drifted to the periphery. "Jess," I said when she answered, "I need to ask you something important. Could Noah and I stay with you for a while, if we needed to? Just temporarily." Her response was immediate. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Not yet," I replied, "but it will be." The final piece fell into place when I discovered that Ryan had never added me to the operating agreement for the new manufacturing facility, the one I'd found funding for last year. An oversight that, according to Diana, would work in my favor. "They've been careless," Diana said, reviewing my documents. "They assumed you'd never fight back. That makes you dangerous." On the last night of my preparation, Ryan came home late, smelling of expensive scotch and self-satisfaction. "Big news," he announced, dropping his keys on the counter. "We're expanding to Europe. Tim found investors willing to front the capital." "That's wonderful," I said, carefully monitoring my expression. "When did this happen?" "Been working on it for months," he replied proudly. "Didn't want to jinx it by talking about it. The papers are being drawn up next week." I nodded, thinking of the European trademark applications I'd submitted years ago, also in my name only. They were planning an expansion using intellectual property they didn't own. "You seem distracted," Ryan said, finally noticing my quietness. Still upset about that nanny comment? Mom feels bad about that, you know. I'm not upset, I replied truthfully. I'm just thinking about the future. That's my girl, he said, patting my shoulder like I was a loyal pet. Always planning ahead. He had no idea how right he was. In my purse was an invitation to the quarterly company meeting, the one I'd supposedly been too busy with mom stuff to attend for the past 2 years. But this time, I'd be there. And I wouldn't be coming alone. As Ryan slept beside me that night, I sent one final email to Diana with the subject line, "Ready." Her response came immediately. "See you at 9 a.m. Bring the red folder." In that folder was every document they'd need to dismantle the house of cards the Caldwell men had built on my foundation. Every signature they'd forged. Every contract they'd executed using my intellectual property. Every investor they'd misled about my role. They thought I was weak. That was their first mistake. Their last would be discovering how wrong they were. The Caldwell Performance headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, all glass and steel and success. I parked my car in the visitor section rather than my usual spot, a small but deliberate choice that set the tone for what was coming. "You sure about this?" Diana asked as we walked toward the entrance, her in a crisp charcoal suit, me in a deep red dress I'd bought specially for this day. "More sure than I've been about anything in years," I replied. Martin Green met us in the lobby, along with 2 other original investors I'd contacted. Behind them stood Veronica Preston and her husband James. The small group looked out of place among the modern furniture and oversized company logo, my logo, that dominated the reception area. "Mrs. Caldwell?" The receptionist looked confused. "The quarterly meeting is executives only. I don't see you on the list." "That's fine, Karen. I'll sign myself in." I picked up the pen, writing my name with deliberate strokes. "These are my guests." Before she could protest, Martin stepped forward. "As a board member and founding investor, I'm authorizing their attendance." We took the elevator to the top floor conference room, the room, as Ryan called it. Through the glass walls, I could see them already assembled. Ryan at the head of the table, Tim beside him, Robert, James, Maxwell, and the other executives they'd hired to replace me one function at a time. Ryan's face when I walked in, that moment alone was worth everything. Surprise, confusion, then irritation washed over his features in quick succession.
"Mia?"
"What are you doing here? And who are these people?" I smiled, placing my red folder on the table. "I thought it was time I attended a meeting about my company." "Your company?" Tim laughed. "That's cute. Look, we're in the middle of something important. The Europe deal." "Will not be happening," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Not as currently structured, anyway." The room went silent. Diana stepped forward, distributing copies of a document to everyone at the table. "What is this?" Robert demanded, scanning the pages. "That," I said, taking a seat directly opposite Ryan, "is a notice of intellectual property infringement. Caldwell Performance has been using trademarks, logos, and business identifiers that are registered solely to me, Mia Caldwell, without proper licensing or compensation." Ryan laughed, though it sounded hollow. "This is ridiculous. We're married. What's mine is yours." "That's not how business law works," Diana replied. "And as you'll see on page 3, Mrs. Caldwell is also exercising her right to withdraw her investment stake in the European expansion, as well as her controlling interest in the primary manufacturing facility." "Controlling interest?" Maxwell looked up from the papers, his Harvard-educated mind clearly processing the implications faster than the others. "That's impossible." "Check the documents," I said calmly. "The West Side facility was funded through an LLC I established. Ryan never added the building to the corporate holdings. An oversight, I'm sure." "You can't do this," Tim said, his face flushing. "We built this company. We did the work." "Did you?" I opened my folder and began laying out papers like playing cards. "Here's the original business plan in my handwriting. Here are emails from our first 5 clients, all addressed to me. Here's the trademark registration, in my name only. Here's the website domain, registered to me. Here's the original loan application, with my signature as guarantor. With each document, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Martin and the other original investors nodded in recognition of papers they'd seen years ago. "This is what happens," I continued, "when you treat your co-founder like the help. When you introduce her as just the nanny, instead of acknowledging that she built the foundation you're standing on." Ryan's face had gone pale. "You're trying to destroy everything we built? What about Noah? What about our family?" "I'm not destroying anything," I replied. "I'm reclaiming my work. As for Noah, he deserves to see his mother valued for her contributions. What kind of example would I be setting if I continued to let you erase me?" "What do you want?" Robert asked, his usual bluster deflated. Diana placed another document on the table. "Mrs. Caldwell is willing to negotiate a licensing agreement for continued use of the intellectual property, pending a restructuring of the company leadership and appropriate credit for her founding role." "And if we refuse?" Tim challenged. "Then I'll be forced to issue cease and desist orders to all of your clients, distributors, and manufacturing partners," I said. "Considering that the Caldwell Performance name and logo, which I created and own, appear on every product, vehicle, and piece of marketing material you produce, that would be problematic." The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost see the calculations happening behind Ryan's eyes, weighing his pride against financial ruin. "The investors are willing to continue supporting Caldwell Performance," Martin added, "but only with Mia restored to her rightful position. She's the reason most of us invested in the first place." One by one, the executives turned to look at Ryan, waiting for his response. The power in the room had shifted so completely that even he couldn't deny it. "You planned this," he finally said, his voice a mixture of anger and something close to admiration. "All this time, while playing the dutiful wife." "I wasn't playing anything," I corrected him. "I was building, creating, and contributing while you were busy taking credit. The only difference now is that I'm done being invisible." I stood, gathering my documents back into the folder. "My lawyer will remain to discuss terms. I have a lunch meeting with the Preston Group about a potential partnership." I glanced at Veronica, who smiled. "They're interested in working with the actual architect of Caldwell Performance's success." As I walked toward the door, Ryan called after me.
"Mia, wait. We can talk about this."
Privately. I turned, meeting his eyes one last time. "I wasn't the nanny, Ryan. I was the architect. And today, I'm taking back what's mine." The elevator doors closed on his stunned face, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. In my purse, my phone was already buzzing with messages from board members wanting to speak with me directly. They had finally seen me, and they were terrified. "Are you ready, Ms. Caldwell?" 6 months had passed since the day I walked into that boardroom and changed everything. I straightened my jacket and nodded to my assistant, taking one last glance at my reflection in the glass wall of my office. My office, with my name on the door.
"Let's do this," I said.
The conference room fell silent as I entered. 20 executives from one of Europe's largest automotive companies sat waiting, their eyes following me as I took my place at the head of the table. No one was wondering why I was there. No one was mistaking me for the help. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice strong and clear. Horizon Innovations is excited to explore this partnership. Horizon Innovations, my company, founded 3 months after the Caldwell Performance confrontation, built with the same expertise and vision that had created their empire, but with one crucial difference. Here, my name came first. The meeting flowed smoothly. I presented our projections, answered technical questions, and outlined our proprietary technology. When we adjourned 2 hours later, the European CEO himself approached me. "Impressive operation, Ms. Caldwell. Your reputation precedes you." I smiled. "Thank you. I've been in this industry longer than most realize." After they left, I returned to my office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city I'd once helped build from behind the scenes. On my desk sat 3 framed photographs: Noah playing soccer, my sister Jessica and me at the grand opening of Horizon, and the original sketch of the Caldwell Performance logo I'd drawn years ago on our kitchen table. Not a souvenir of bitterness, but a reminder of how far I'd come. My phone chimed with a reminder. School pickup in 30 minutes. No matter how busy things got, I never missed it. Being present for Noah was non-negotiable, especially now. The divorce had been finalized 4 months ago. Ryan had fought it at first, alternating between anger and desperate attempts at reconciliation. "We can fix this," he'd pleaded. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you did for the company." "It's too late," I'd told him. "I don't want recognition anymore. I want ownership of my life." In the end, the settlement was swift. My leverage with the trademarks and intellectual property meant Ryan had to choose between a fair division or watching Caldwell Performance collapse. He chose the former. We now shared custody of Noah, and I'd kept my promise to myself. Our son would see his mother valued for her work. As I drove to Noah's school, I thought about how differently everything had unfolded than I'd expected. I hadn't set out to destroy Ryan or his family, only to reclaim what was mine. After the initial shock, the restructuring of Caldwell Performance had been surprisingly civil. I retained a significant ownership stake and licensed the trademarks to them under strict conditions, including public acknowledgement of my founding role. The business press had a field day with the story. "Hidden architect of Caldwell Empire steps into the light," read one headline. Industry publications that had never mentioned my name now requested interviews. Former colleagues reached out, many admitting they'd seen how I'd been sidelined but had been afraid to speak up. Noah was waiting on the school steps, his face lighting up when he saw me.
"Mom."
"I got an A on my science project." "That's amazing." I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of playground and crayons. "Want to get ice cream to celebrate?" As we sat at the small ice cream parlor near our new home, Noah looked thoughtful. "Dad said your company might be bigger than his someday." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he now?"
"Yeah."
He sounded kind of proud, actually. Noah licked his chocolate cone. "Is that weird?" I considered this. Ryan had been different lately. Humbled, perhaps. Our last few custody exchanges had been almost friendly. Last week, he'd even asked my advice about a supplier issue, treating me like the business equal I'd always been. "Not weird," I finally answered. "Just growth." Later that evening, after Noah was asleep, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from Veronica Preston, who had become both a close friend and business ally. Preston Group board approved the joint venture. Where a go? I smiled. The joint venture would make Horizon a major player in sustainable automotive technology, a vision I'd had years ago but could never pursue under the Caldwell umbrella. Another message came through from Claire, my former mother-in-law. Our relationship had been strained since the split, her pride wounded by my public reclamation of power. But the message surprised me. Amanda asked if you'd speak at her women's business luncheon next month. About entrepreneurship. I told her you'd be perfect, if you're willing. I stared at the screen, feeling an unexpected emotion. Not vindication, but a quiet satisfaction. They finally saw me, not as Ryan's wife, not as Noah's mother, but as Mia Caldwell, entrepreneur and innovator. A notification from my calendar popped up. Investor call, 8 a.m. Tomorrow would be another full day of building something that was undeniably mine. My phone rang. Ryan. Probably about Noah's upcoming school event. I answered with my new standard greeting. Mia Caldwell. There was a pause then. Mia? I just wanted to say congratulations on the Preston deal. That was always your vision, not ours. You deserve it. Thank you, Ryan, I said, meaning it. After we hung up, I gazed at the city lights, thinking about the journey. I'd lost a marriage, but found myself. Noah was thriving, watching his mother lead with confidence. Former adversaries were becoming respectful colleagues. And my work, my true, recognized work, was changing an industry. The family that had once relegated me to just the nanny now approached me as equals, some even seeking my mentorship. Investors who had once ignored me now called daily. And women throughout the industry reached out for advice on navigating paths I'd had to forge alone.
Funny.
They needed a nanny, but what they lost was a CEO. And what I gained was a life that finally belonged to me.